How do everybody? I've got a couple of stories here that I found. They are both from a couple of days ago during the week. But because of family commitments, I've only just been able to do them now. But this definitely feeds into what I've been saying about how I do think that the government is trying to push the population into accepting us going into a war footing. So the first story I'm going to get into, this is a brand new update on the story. I'm glad I found this actually because I was going to talk about it. And it's to do with the plane that Grant Shap was on, the defence secretary, who his plane got it had electronic countermeasures were engaged against it in this suspect by Russia. And I was going to talk about how I think that maybe the government have allowed that to happen, and how they've publicised it for various reasons, blah blah blah. Well, this feeds right into that anyway about what I was leading into with other stories. So anyway, here we go. So this is from the Independent. Every story I put, by the way, I will put in the description below, so you can read. I'm probably not going to read the whole stories, but if you want to read the full things yourself, please do. So anyway, here we go. So government chose not to put defences on plane carrying shaps which Russia subjected to jamming attack. Russia is believed to have jammed the signal of an RAF plane carrying Grant Shaps in an electronic attack described as wildly irresponsible earlier this week. I believe the attack was something to do with the plane's tracking capabilities for flying. But my understanding is that they do have onboard tracking systems anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. Anyway, I'll read this. I'll read this bit first, this first paragraph, and then we'll have a bit of a discussion about it. The RAF plane that suffered a jamming attack by Russia whilst with Grant Shaps on board was without key protections due to limitations on government spending. Russia is believed to have jammed the signal of an RAF plane carrying Grant Shaps in an electronic attack, which was described as wildly irresponsible earlier this week. What they're saying about government spending, I believe, is intentional. There is no way that they would hold back spending on a plane that they're going to be sending government ministers out on. I genuinely believe that that was allowed to happen and that has been set up to happen in order for something like this to happen. It's basically like getting a fishing rod and casting it out. They know the Russians aren't going to shoot down a plane with a government minister on because that would just be insane. That'd be white. Even Putin's not a mad. I know people think he is a madman, but he's actually not. He's Russian, and Russian people are, believe it or not, actually different in a civilizational sense and how they think about the world. They're just different in how they approach things, but they're not mad. He's not crazy. He's not insane. I know a lot of people like to think he is, but he isn't. Believe it or not, he's actually a very intelligent man. He knows what he's doing. He's not actually incompetent. I know it makes it easier to hate him and to dislike those people by just imagining him to be like wild, raving madmen, but he's actually not. He's very cold and calculating. But that sort of temptation to attempt to at least attempt to jam a plane like that, of course they're going to do it. And we do the exact same thing. If we knew that there were Russian planes flying over with Russian delegates on, we would do the exact same thing, just harass them using non-lethal force. It's just what militaries do. So I believe our government has actually allowed this to happen, intentionally underfunded it so that something like this could happen, and that would then give them an excuse to then throw this out, as we're seeing. I mean, we are going into the conspiracy side of it. Why would we advertise this this is clearly a national security level issue. This clearly shows our country as being weak and the military as being weak. Why, if this was genuine, why would we be allowed this to be put into the papers? Why would they be giving this information out? Because only the RAF have information to that. Have that information. So the only way the papers have got all of this information is by it being given to them by the RAF or by government. So why would they do that? Why would they show this clear and obvious weakness? Well, it's because they want the public to know about it. Otherwise, they would be hiding this because it would be a weakness in our armour and in our defences. So they want the public to know that this is a weakness that we have so that they can then make calls for higher spending in the military. Not necessarily putting taxes up, but to spend more money, to take money away from other sections and put it into the military, into the MOD, and also to make people think about the military as well. Because I've said in my other videos, I do believe that we're going into a war footing, and I do believe that we are going to be going to war with Russia. Now, it may not be a hot war, it may be a cold war, like during the Soviet Union era, but I do believe that we are going to be going to war with Russia, and I do believe that they're going to be wanting a lot more manpower in the military. And they're going to be wanting, possibly, well, not possibly, I think we are going to be seeing conscription. And the next story I'm going to bring up is going to highlight that. The GPS signal of the plane was said to have been interfered with for half an hour while it passed the Russian territory of Kaliningrad, which is between Poland and Lithuania. If you've not seen it on a map where you've got the Baltic, you basically have like Denmark, Germany, Poland, and it sort of goes like to little Lithuania states. And Kaliningrad's a little tiny satellite state. And the only thing that connects it to Russia is a train track, and that's it. And it's a holdover from the Soviet Union. I think the train track's something like 60 miles or something like that, or 30 miles from Kaliningrad to actual Russian territory per se. So it's just a weird little like a holdover, for, like I say, from when the Soviet Union was a thing. So the defense secretary was, I believe, they kept it so they could keep access to the Baltic Sea. I think that's why, or the Black Sea, whichever one it is. I can't remember. I think it's the Baltic Sea, in it, that. But yeah, anyway, so I think so they could keep a port there, so they could get a Russian fleet in there, have a legitimate reason to have Russian ships sailing in there. The defence secretary was on board the RAF Dassault 900 Lima X-ray Falcon jet named Envoy. On the way back from Poland on Wednesday, when the attack took place, the aircraft's flight path was visible to trackers. Yeah, so the GPS has been messed with, but that doesn't mean that they haven't got in-cab navigational systems, you know, so it's not a massive thing to worry about. And again, I do just think it's well, here we go, actually. However, the plane was not fitted with protective systems due to tight defence budget in place when the jet was put into action in 2022. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, people might say, well, that was 2 years ago. Well, you think planning for war happens in just a couple of months? These things take years and years. You know, these things build up for years. You know, Russia didn't just invade Ukraine on a whim. That was something that's taken them years to build up to that point. You know, you go back to like the invasion of the Crimea, really, and the invasion of Georgia. This is how far back the Russians have been planning for all of this, getting themselves ready to invade. You know, it takes a long, long time to do this sort of stuff. It's not just like throwing dice on a table or something, you know, on a whim. Going to war it takes a lot of prior preparation and planning, you know, and getting your whole industry motivated to it, as we're finding out now after the peace dividend proved not to have been what it was supposed to have been, and that history didn't actually end when the Berlin Wall came down. We're suddenly realising that people are still the same. It's just technology changes. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. As I say, I'll put the link in below for that story, so you can read the full article yourself. But this next one is going to feed right into what I've been talking about, and this is to do with conscription, and this is the Danish government on about conscription, and Denmark is planning to conscript women and increase the length of national service from 4 months, well, that's short, to 11 months for both genders, the country's Prime Minister has announced. Now, why is a Danish issue of conscription, which is really a minor country, not to downplay the Danes, you know, they do wonderful things, wonderful industry, very productive people, great people, but they're a very, very small country, you know. And by the way, I've served with Danes, not directly side by side with them, but in the same area when I was in Afghanistan. Excellent soldiers, you know, got a lot of respect for them, you know, very professional, very good at the job, you know. So in that regard, I've got nothing against them. But it's not like we're talking about America here, is it? You know, but this is because they're a NATO country, and this is going to be a NATO effort. And again, this is about conscription and about trying to normalise it. So this is again being put into our papers. And I'm not saying the government have directly ordered them, but they are able to signal the papers. I mean, we're seeing it now as well. And this is another signal. The government's on about banning foreign interests from owning news and media in the UK. Again, that is signalling that we're going into a war footing. Don't listen to what they say. Look at what they do. And it's the same with the papers. The government has a lot more control over the papers than what people realise. You know, 99% of the time they let them get away with what they want. But it's like, I don't know if any of you have heard of something called a D notice. Well, what that stands for is the Defence Notice, and it comes from World War One. And it's all the loose lips sink ships thing. Anyway, I'll read a little bit more of this, and then I'll get back to explaining more about it. So we do not rearm because we want war. We are rearming because we want to avoid it. Mette Frederiksen said on Wednesday, apologies if I've butchered that name, said on Wednesday, adding that the government wanted full equality between the sexes. Well, that's another point as well. You know, I mean, if you want equal rights, you're going to get equal lefts as well, I'm afraid. So, you know, like, equal rights isn't just about getting higher pay and having access to better jobs. Guess what? It also comes with things like being conscripted as well and being meat for the grinder. So that's equality for you. Denmark currently has up to 9,000 professional troops. I mean, we're short of, we would class 80,000 as being a minimum, and we're below that. We're also like 72,000 at the moment. And we class that as a small army. Well, it's not even an army; it's a defence force. So 9,000 professional troops is absolutely nothing. It's just a defence force. But again, very very professional people. I'm not trying to downplay how good they are, but again, it's not about how significant they are as a force. It's about the news of the conscription and that they're trying to normalise this news in the general public of Great Britain to make us accept conscription when they finally call for it. So anyway, professional troops on top of the 4,700 conscripts undergoing basic training according to official figures. The government wants to increase the number of conscripts by 300 to reach a total of 5,000. The country is a member of the NATO alliance and a staunch supporter for Ukraine in its war against Russia's invasion. I mean, again, not to downplay him, but it's all well and good being a staunch supporter of Ukraine. But when you've got a professional force of 9,000 troops, I think the Russian military is something like currently 100,000 soldiers. And I know professional soldiers are far superior to conscripts, but there does come a point where all the professionalism in the world just gets overwhelmed by a tidal wave of human mass. You just don't have enough bullets to deal with what's coming towards you. You don't have enough anti-tank missiles, to deal with all the tanks. Russia's got something like 20,000 tanks, or did have something like 20,000 tanks. That's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Like, I don't even think we have enough anti-tank weapons to deal with that as a collective of NATO. They have that many tanks, and that's the thing. It's so they don't need to be high quality. They just need to have more of them than we have weapons to fire back at them. And that is part of the Russian psychology and part of the Russian tactics. Is what they did in World War II against the Germans. I mean, now there's a much deeper conversation there about the Germans getting beaten by the Russians because they were also fighting on the Western Front against the Allies as well. And I think a fair argument could be made that it may have been a different story if the Russians and just the Germans were fighting and that was it, and we'd stayed out of the war along with the Americans. I think the Germans may have beaten them, but I don't think it would have been an easy victory for them. I think it would have been very close either way. Lars Lokke Rasmussen, the Danish foreign minister, stressed that Russia does not now pose a threat to Denmark. Well, I don't want to get into that, but we will bring ourselves to places where it could come, they could come to do that. Mr. Rasmussen added, all physically fit men in Denmark over the age of 18 are called up for military service, which lasts roughly 4 months. However, because there are enough volunteers, there is a lottery system, meaning not all young men serve. Now, does that include all the new Danes, or what about all the illegal Danes? And this is part of my reason. I've got a video about conscription, which I'll link in below, about what the biggest problem that I have with it is, why should people like me and the majority of people watching this, why should we fight in wars and die for a bunch of illegal migrants loading it up in a 5-star hotel who are never going to be eligible for that service, while they're all laughing their asses off, ringing back home saying how good they've got it, with a 5-star bed and big screen TV and the pocket money and getting brand new Nike shoes and all that, and then going out and getting into trouble, so to speak, of a quite depraved nature that we're all aware of, that happens quite regularly, but doesn't like to get spoken about. Why should we go and fight and die so they can do that? But again, that's another conversation for another time. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Again, I just wanted to touch on these because I just think it provides further evidence for what I've been saying this whole time, which is we are seeing the country being prepared for a war footing, and it's just more evidence that I just wanted to show people really for that and just try and get people thinking about this. Also, look out for other things as well. The government are starting, not just us but the Americans and all the West as a whole, are starting to put the woke away, so to speak. So things like, we're going to start seeing, I think, a lot less of gay pride when that comes around again. I'm not saying it's going to go away. What I'm saying is we're not going to see flags daubed everywhere. It's not going to be like in your face, and all the big corporations aren't going to have rainbows all over their internet presence, and you're not going to be walking into like businesses and everybody's going to have like rainbow lanyards on and all that. That's all going to start going away, and films are going to go back to more like the sort of late 80s, early 90s sort of, I think, archetypical hero's journey again, with a decent story rather than trying about sending a political message to you. Things like that, and even things like, I don't know, adverts for razor blades are going to go back to being men playing sports and holding newborn babies and being masculine in general, as opposed to, again, trying to lecture you on being toxic and masculine. So again, start looking out for things like that, and you'll start picking up on these things yourself. And once you notice it, it's very hard to unnotice the actual messaging that is coming through. Anyway, this has gone on a bit longer than what it normally does. We're coming to 15 minutes now, so I'll leave it there. If you've found this insightful, or even if you've not agreed with me, but it's at least got you thinking and giving you something to think about, please do like and subscribe, and definitely put a comment below, even if you don't agree with me. I like to say I'm not a closed book. I am open to other people's interpretations and views, and I don't think I'm right on everything. And it's part of the reason why I do these videos, is to get ideas out and try and get people involved in conversations about what's happening in the world. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I've waffled on for quite a bit now. Take care and goodbye.